Okay, thanks. Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. We have a headline today. Maritza Bond announces that she is the first candidate for Secretary of the State who has raised enough money to qualify for public financing. That's a threshold. She's crossed it. She's excited about it. And she's in the studio to tell us all about that and how her campaign is going to be the state's top elections official. Maritza Bond, welcome to Dateline New Haven.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to see you.
It's nice to see you too, Maritza. So tell us what happened. This was yesterday, made the announcement. And what was the threshold you crossed?
90,000, a little bit over 90,000. We're really excited. We had to raise 86,600, and they recommend a buffer. And so we worked through 5% of the buffer, and just really excited, honestly, and overwhelmed with gratitude.
So what it means is you crossed the threshold that qualifies you, once they approve it, to get money from the state government to run for office through the Citizen
Election
Program, which is public financing. And that's
Correct.
A program that's not that old. I think it was set up in the wake of the Rowland scandals to say we don't want money to be determining who gets elected to office, that if you show you have enough support, although it's no easy task to raise the money, but if you raise a certain amount of money, we'll give you a lot more money so you can get your message out because you're a legit candidate. How much money do you get from the state once they approve it?
So for the primary, we'll get $400,000. And so just really grateful that we're able to, as individuals that want to take a pursuit in the political arena, to be able to qualify for a grant to that magnitude, to be able to really spread our message. I think it's important as we journey through this political process. For me, it's been a lot of around education. I have a lot of grassroots supporters that are not typically engaged in this process. And so I'm glad that you asked that question, because the funds allow us to be able to really allow us to use funds to have a statewide multimedia and also staff that will be able to get the word out and get the message to the voters.
And just so people know, you can't just go to Daddy Warbucks and say, write me a check for $90,000. You got to really hustle, because you have to get a lot of different people who are registered voters. Did they have to be Democrats since it's primary?
No. So, I mean, in order for people to vote for the primary, they have to be registered as a Democrat. And that's another important component. And for me, as part of this platform, is going to be coupled with emphasizing the importance of coming out to vote during the primary. I
do want to get to that.
Yeah.
Because convincing people on August 9th not to go to the beach, but to go to the polls when there's no governor's race is not going to be easy. But it wasn't easy to raise $90,000. Don't you have a limit, like how many contributions you have to get from how many voters?
No. So fortunately for a constitutional office, I don't have to break it down by like a contribution amount per person. But we did have a limit of $290. And
that is a limit, because they want you to have more people. You don't want just one check from Daddy Warbucks.
Yes, absolutely. So the limit is some people that run for like state rep, they have to have like a certain amount, $5, certain amount, $10, etc. So the limit is $290 per person, and you
have to have at least 86,000.
86,600.
Oh, 86,600. All right. I know you were on to every last dollar, because we had Yash Roy was at your event where you're getting that last check. And do they have to all be Connecticut voters to do that?
No, but the majority have to live in Connecticut, and a small percentage can be out of state.
Okay.
So I was able to get a few supporters from out of state. I am from Brooklyn, New York, and so I'm grateful for some out of state.
So you were really excited about this, because for one reason, it's just hard, right? Because everyone's hustling. I'm reading about, there's only been one person so far in the treasurer's race in one party, a Republican, who's qualified. You got to really hustle. You got to go every night to people, make phone calls, go to their small gatherings, right?
Yes.
So how did you do it? What worked?
In the last 2 decades, I have worked across the state, and I have built such a vast network of people. I had over close to 4,000 contacts when we downloaded my iPhone contacts. And
what do you mean when you started?
When I started and I announced my exploratory committee, I started with the people I knew first. And, and shared my vision and why I wanted to become the next Secretary of the State. And so grateful that it really spiraled from there.
So that's interesting to me. Like, you're running for office for the first time, and you're not running for local office. You're running for a big statewide office.
Absolutely.
And so you started by with the people you know. So you've worked in public health in the Valley. You've worked in public health in New Haven. You ran public health in Bridgeport. So I'm sorry.
And a nonprofit for 10 years in Eastern Connecticut and running statewide programs through that agency.
So was that where the bulk of those 4,000 people came, people you knew from doing public health?
It was a combination of personal friends, family members, and then and some colleagues that I knew that I built friendships with. So I would call them my personal friends.
Or what about people you worked in the community with, but they weren't
correct
part of your job? Like,
exactly. So
like when New Haven, when you did COVID stuff, you were dealing with neighborhood health agencies, you were dealing with churches, you were dealing with grassroots groups trying to get people information.
And I grew up with a lot of people in New Haven. And so I was very fortunate that I would have initial supporters who would then host a meet and greet, and then it would spiral that way. So it was expanding even further right within my network, and was very grateful that I had a diverse pool of supporters that were able to just give $5 and some that were able to give $290.
Is there a minimum that it had to be? Did it have to be $5? Okay, $5 minimum.
And, and I had a combination of both. And for that, I'm grateful because, for people invest into supporting, and they were part of this movement that I'm promoting.
We're talking to Maritza Bond. She's running for Secretary of State. She's one of only 2 Democrats left. There were a field of 6 or 7 who actually showing up to stuff. There were more who considered it. And only 2 are left. There are 2, Maritza Bond and Stephanie Thomas, who got the state convention endorsement. Maritza got enough support at that convention to qualify for the primary. And on August 9th, the Democrats can decide whom they want to have replace Denise Merrill to be the top elections official, running elections and voter registration in the state, as well as the commercial database. So when you were raising money, what did you find out, and was it what you expected? Was it more in person? Was it more of those horrible phone calls politicians always tell me about, that they have to, your ear gets calluses on it, you're just calling people all night? Or was it email mostly? What worked?
So it was a combination. I love the interaction face-to-face because it's more authentic and genuine, and people have the opportunity to really get to know me as an individual and my personality for those that I did not know. But as you know, I was hit with Omicron in the midst of trying to fundraise. And so I had to pivot and have a lot of phone calls during one of the quarters between December and March, where I really did a lot of phone calls. And so not my favorite thing, but definitely was necessary, and was thankful that when I did a combination of the email and phone calls in the midst of Omicron, and I discontinued face-to-face interactions temporarily, people actually thanked me for that. They thanked me for being responsible, and was able to have a successful quarter because of it.
And then you were able to come back out in March?
Yeah, towards the end of March, I once things sort of leveled out, and as you know, as the health director, I sort of was monitoring, and so when cases were trending down, I then felt
it's not just case loads; it's how severe, right?
The severity of it. And thankfully, we were it was not as severe; it was just highly contagious.
Yeah. So you pivoted back to more in person. How is there more yield by going on the phone? Like, in other words, you spend less time per contribution, but maybe more enduring political relationships when you're in person? Is that sort of the trade-off? Like, if you're going to put a lot of work into getting 50 people at Brazi's, most of which might check anyway because they're supporters, but it builds momentum for your campaign.
That's
whereas
right.
Suppose if you make 50 phone calls, it's less time, you get a higher yield.
It's not visible.
Which is more important, or you just got to do both?
I think you have to do a it has to be a multi-pronged approach. You have to do the email combination with the text messages, phone calls, and face-to-face interacting. I also did a lot of Zoom meet and greets, and so thank you.
Was that for that quarter when you couldn't go in person?
And I was so grateful for that.
I hate Zoom.
I do. Well, not that I hate it, but
well, it's better than the alternative, which is not to talk to people or see them.
Yeah, so I did appreciate that some of them were virtual, and I was able to still interact.
And
with
how did
people.
you deal the virtual meetings to still try to come across as Maritza as opposed to like a 2-dimensional image? Did you have an interesting background? Did you have music? Did you have a thing to make sure you said before you got into the pitch?
I try to like, be very I try to make jokes in between and just make it more interactive in that manner. I should have thought about the music. I didn't think about having some.
But I'm thinking like
music,
Brazi's, people get to show up and they get to go out for the night.
Yep.
And they're not just talking to Maritza, they're talking to other people who are in the campaign. Yep. And I think for campaigns, a lot of for people that like to be part of something. So we believe in the candidate, we believe in the issue, we believe in making things better, and we like to go out and see people while we're doing that and, eat and drink and have fun. So I guess you got to do that again after that quarter, but Zoom can't do that.
No, it cannot. And so, but it worked in the interim. And so, just the fact that I've never ran for office, as you mentioned. Nevertheless, I certainly have government experience, both as an educator and in management, and demonstrated in the midst of crisis that when people have knowledge, they have power to make choices. And I want to be able to sort of transfer those skills over to the Secretary of the State's
Okay, let's pivot
office.
to that. Maritza Bond running for Secretary of the State. You're now in line to get $400,000.
Yes.
So you don't have to spend day and night raising money when you're not at your day job. This gives you time, you said, to put out your message.
Yes, right.
What is that message you want to get out? You started talking about your personal experience.
Yeah, for me, first and foremost, to be back in New Haven and I was raised here in the section of Fairhaven, and then to come back to be able to serve as a health official for the city in the midst of crisis was just for me, just grateful that I was able to be here in the midst of that. And of course, everyone has a silver lining in different experiences that they've had in the response during COVID. Some people wrote books. Some people started a new
Connected to
career.
nature, got nice relationships.
Yeah, and for me, I was able to sort of see our system at its bare exposure, if one could say, and really saw firsthand just the opportunity when I had to reopen our polling stations, for example, and just seeing some of the infrastructure support that's needed, and didn't know what to do quite with that issue when I sort of discovered it. The fact that I am a voter, of course, and but seeing it from the other angle and trying to make sure people had accessibility. And also businesses. As you know, I licensed businesses in this city, and part of our reopening plan, I partnered with our economic development department, and, shout out to the team there. And we had to work together on how to reopen our city, our businesses, and they struggled, and some of them didn't get to survive through this pandemic. And really small businesses are the backbone of our state. And the function of the Secretary of the State is twofold. It's access and integrity around voting, and is also the first point of entry for anyone that wants to open up a business.
Because you need regulatory approval for your incorporation.
Exactly. And so my vision is to be able to ensure that we're looking at access and integrity around voting by looking at ways that we can enhance education, civic engagement. One thing that I can say for certain is, as an urban girl, I was not taught or given the opportunity to go to the Capitol for a tour. And so we really need equity around how we educate. What
would you do about that? You can have more tourists from the city?
So I think for me, it's going to be critical for to partner with the education department and seeing how we can further enhance civic engagement equitably across Connecticut. I also currently learn.
Does that mean you want to get more kids up to the Capitol?
That's right, and not necessarily the Capitol, but just really understand the civic process and the academic studies, and of course having the Capitol tours as an option. And as the current Secretary of the State, what I learned from a local a prior first elected person in Connecticut is that the Secretary of the State's office has a level of civic program. And it's just sort of limited. So I want to expand that. I also want to support policies, but such as early voting and further expanding absentee ballots. But I do not want to push policies from the top down. As a policy implementer currently, we know that doesn't work when we don't have the people that are going to be impacted by those policies to be at the table. And so I want to really commission a task force that's going to be comprised of local registrars so that that's from different sizes and communities, so that they can be part of the process when we're talking about implementing it.
Specifically what?
So if we're talking about early voting, we should have local registrars on what are the implications that this is going to have at the local level, whether it's a small town, medium-sized cities, or a large city. It's important for us to really be looking at infrastructure externally. I also want to be able to, as you know, support internal infrastructure. And within my management role, the Secretary of the State's office size is similar to my current staff structure, and as well as the budget. And so I want to make sure that there's internal infrastructure to support the external entities that are really carrying out the mission of the Secretary of the State's office.
And in talking about this task force, we want to work with the local registrars, and you are the person who tells local
That's
registrars
right.
the rules, and you want to hear back from them. you're talking about getting their input because it's a couple-year process we have if we're going to get early voting in Connecticut. There's this whole multi-step constitutional amendment process. Absentee ballot voting, like automatic, no excuses. You support those two concepts?
Absolutely.
But you're saying your role will be to get the registrars in on the process for how it would work?
And as a leader, and leading two government entities, one thing that I've been successful in showing how government can work is you need to know when to lead or serve as a convener. And in this particular circumstance, it's important for us to convene local registrars and town clerks as we are considering policies that impact them.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean you support the movement's going down, but you're not going to drive the train for the constitutional amendment? You're going to drive the train
I'm not going to talk about the top down. I want to make sure that it's a collective collaboration.
Maritza running for Secretary of State. Tell me about a moment on the campaign trail so far that sticks out in your mind that surprised you or gave you a sense of this is why I do it.
I get that question asked a lot, believe it or not. I think for me,
I am surprised.
I've never been through this integral process. I have been appointed as an official or contracted as an official for two major cities. And in this particular job, you need to be elected into office. And so just the political process to get on the ballot and having to go before Democratic town committees, I think that the lay person doesn't understand the level of steps that one needs to become a politician. And so I have respect for the process. And it's important, what I've learned for me is how critical it is for us to be engaged and the crucial component of education. Because I think when we really educate people about the dynamics of getting into office and how you can hold a politician accountable when you elect them into office and the power that people have when they can vote is why I want to really be the next Secretary of State.
Is there like a town committee meeting you slept to at 11 night driving back from Southington or Norfolk or something that you can remember that sticks out in your mind from this campaign so far, or a moment?
Yeah, I think there were times that people who could not see, they were curious about my background and tying it together. And so there were moments throughout the visiting different communities where, they were looking at a legislator versus the management of that role, of that office, and really how that office needs to be bipartisan, similar to my role now. So
I actually have responsibility too, which is to remind people under the FCC guidelines that you're listening at the top of the hour to Dateline New Haven on WNHH FM 103.5, live streamed on newhavenindependent.org, and broadcast from New Haven, Connecticut. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, just that we have to do that. Maritza is running for Secretary of State. She's also the City Health Director in New Haven. We have a few minutes left. I want to ask you, you're running for office at the same time that the country is watching hearings about the January 6th riot that happened at the Capitol when they tried to certify the presidential election.
Yes.
Is that background music to you? Is it playing in your earbuds? I don't mean like technically are you listening, but how does this factor into your campaign? What does this have to do with the campaign you're running?
Well, more than ever, we need to protect our democracy. And so for certain, we need to rise up to the occasion and being able to take a stance. In Connecticut, we've been very fortunate. Nevertheless, we need to understand that it's out there and that we have a threat, and it's a real threat. And we cannot be a passive leader in this particular role. And I wasn't a passive leader either in my response to the pandemic and having to deal with a lot of misinformation and really political attacks from the Republican Party. And so for me is really making sure that we are positioned to being transparent in government, as I've done in two particular roles, and also being able to stand up and stand up and protecting our democracy. And also, I just want to make sure that, we stress the other component of the office that I didn't get to mention is revitalizing our small business unit, because we need to make sure we're supporting our businesses as well in the state of Connecticut. But, what's happening and what happened in the Capitol should never have occurred. We need to ensure that we have security in our systems, and we need to make sure we continue to elect people that are going to protect our democracy, both locally, statewide, and at the federal level.
All right. So one of the issues that came up is Denise Merrill, the current Secretary of State, said we have to deal with this issue of misinformation. For instance,
that's right.
There were all these announcements made before January 6th that people were seen carting ballots away. It turned out they weren't carting ballots away. They came in with a box of ballots, which is in fact they were transporting from places that they're supposed to. So she wants to have a unit to track misinformation in real time. It's been criticized by the Republicans that becomes a way to call something misinformation, but really to use it for political purposes to get propaganda out for the Democratic Party or to cover up things they might do wrong.
Yeah, well, it would be fine. It would be great if they could make up their mind, because first they're talking, it's funny the Republicans say that we're not transparent enough and that elections are being stolen. And then yet here is a solution that will allow us to be more visible and transparent in information and making sure that we're sharing that information. So I would challenge the Republicans to really stop coming up with excuses of why, this is a blue state, and we will, as the Secretary of the State, ensure that everyone has access to voting, and regardless of what political party they choose. But as a Democrat, I am committed to making sure that we combat misinformation and really bring anything to the surface of any issues that we do find.
Do you think there's a legitimate concern by the Republicans that an office that's elected could use a misinformation office to also score political points? Or are you confident that would be used for the purpose of being more transparent so people know how to cast their ballots, what really happened at the polls?
I think that any issue that is reported and that is found should be investigated and brought to the light. But I think this is an opportunity for us to do that and be transparent and being able to identify whether there are gaps that we need to address, whatever political party that is. Because let's just be frank, that misinformation could be coming from the Democratic primary. It could come from both sides. And so I just think that the misinformation, I was excited and elated to see that was going to be in place.
Maritza, if you do win this nomination, you'll be the first Latina or Latino, first Hispanic candidate on a statewide ticket, correct?
Correct.
If you're elected, you'll be the first Hispanic person, not just woman, elected to statewide office. Am I correct in seeing that you've had a nuanced approach to that? You're proud of that. You want people to know that. And you're also being very clear in saying, don't vote for me because I'm Hispanic. Vote for me because I'm the best candidate. That's a complicated message.
Yeah, I am so proud of who I am in my ethnicity and also my culture. But it should not be a qualifier for a skill set. And I think that it's just an icing on the cake that you get to have a little bit of both. But it's definitely important to be able to have that background and experience, because our state is diverse. We need diversity on our ticket. We are overdue. And if you see the Republican Party right now, they are definitely capitalizing and trying to use the Latino community to have them run for office.
There's no question. That's so interesting. That leads me to two questions for you. So the Republican Party has made great inroads in Latino vote in the country, especially places like the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, places like southern Florida, but also nationally, their numbers went up. When the conventional wisdom was there was a president of the Republican Party who was trashing Latinos. It turns out Latinos agreed with the Republican Party, but it wasn't Latinos. Latinos, like any other group, have so many different groups within them. I mean, people come from Cuba, Ecuador, Mexico, Puerto Rico, is probably United States already. And I guess so it's the fastest growing group in Connecticut.
That's right.
The fastest growing population. New Haven is going to be majority. The school system soon is already plurality. And yet, is there a Latino community? Is there a Latino vote?
Of course. And I think one of the things that's really critical, especially when people are migrating here from different countries or even Puerto Rico, it's understanding the voting process. And that is why it's so crucial as the Secretary of the State's office to be a public-facing office, to be able to lead the messaging and be able to partner with the grassroots organization and also trusted community leaders to be that messenger, so that making sure that we're really thinking through literacy, number one, number two, language and culture. It is well overdue. I bring that wealth of background and experience in my nonprofit sector days. That's what I did. I really heightened the language and literacy and understanding the multifaceted cultures that are within the subsets of the community. And so there is certainly an opportunity for us as Democrats to rise to the occasion and embrace the Latino community, because it really is tied to the mission of Democrats. We're talking about addressing inequalities.
And as Harry Jost points out here, Latinos are not being used. They're independent thinkers. And as you're saying, Democrats have to fight for those votes you can't take for granted.
We cannot take them for granted.
Because like on issues like abortion, let's say, or even immigration, it turns out among many sectors, Latino community, not one group here. In Nevada, it's different. Nevada, it's very progressive vote. There's more agreement with Republicans.
And and I think it's unfortunate because even an opponent from the Republican side, in his announcement of running for office, made a discriminatory comment about Latinos just don't know that they realize that they're Republicans yet. I mean, that is so disheartening that you are discrediting Latinos. And I think that is as we are really battling this on a national level, this attack on our democracy, we need to be able to engage Latinos and educate them. And ultimately, they can choose what political party they want to be, but they need to be part of this process and be able to know that they have power when they vote.
Maritza Bond, running for Secretary of State, top elections office and small business officer of the state, has a primary coming up August 9th.
Row B for Bond.
Row B for Bond. How are you going to get people to vote in August?
So we are going to be, now that we're applying for the CEP funds, we're going to be really launching a multimedia campaign that's going to be multifaceted and as well tapping into grassroots leaders to help us get the word out and making sure that we are also engaging through social media.
Are you going to do a funny TikTok?
I may. I may. So definitely coming up with a number of concepts that are going to try to make sure that people are engaged and then making sure that people are, we get voters to come out because we know that on August 9th is tough. It's a summer day. But, the ballots can go from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the evening. And so we want to make sure that even if you get to the beach, the sunset is around 8 o'clock. So come out to vote. Let's make change in Connecticut. And I will be committed to you as a Secretary of the State.
That does sound like the ending, but I still wanted to ask you. You said you're expanding your team from what number to what number?
We don't have I don't have that in front of me right now, but we are going to. Right now, we have a number of volunteers, which I'm so grateful for. They have been committed from day one, and we will be identifying a number of roles and positions that we want to bring in.
Some people. How many people have been hired on staff so far?
So we've been limited. Right now, we have two official. We have our campaign manager, and we have the. Tucker Green that has helped with the fundraising piece.
So you raised $90,000 without basically a paid staff.
I know.
That's impressive.
I know. And I was so grateful to
That's very impressive.
And
who's the campaign manager?
Russ Morin.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and I've been so grateful also that, for like my two nominees were two people that work within the government system and are part of different unions. And so just grateful that people that represent different union memberships are also part of my team.
How do people find out more about the campaign?
So visit me at marixabond.com. We have the platform outlined there. And also follow me on social media. I'm always on the different platforms, Marixabond 4CT. You
do know social media. Maritza Bond, thank you so much for joining us. Dateline Haven, congratulations on making the 90,000.
Thank you.
The 90,000 threshold, that's a big accomplishment.
And thank you to all my supporters out there. I'm going to go all the way. Row B for bonds.
Row B, okay. Hey, is that sort of a play on word? Like you're supposed to also row? I don't know.
Row yourself to the elections.
Okay. Thanks to Harry Droz for producing today's show. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven and Hamden's home for community radio.